The first rule was simple: never hit back. Not if they screamed in your face, not if they spit on you, not even if they slapped you hard enough to make your ears ring. You stood there. You absorbed it. You smiled if they wanted you to smile, because every minute you survived meant more money. And for people like me, money mattered more than dignity. My name is Caleb Turner. 3 years ago, I became what wealthy clients privately called an emotional stuntman. Officially, the company described it differently: stress release performance therapy. That's what the website said. Clean words, corporate words, but the reality was uglier. Clients paid thousands of dollars to unload their anger onto another human being, and desperate people like me volunteered to become the target. I didn't join because I was brave. I joined because my electricity got shut off during winter. At the time, I was sleeping inside a tiny apartment in downtown Chicago with unpaid bills stacked like bricks across my kitchen counter. I worked part-time as an actor, or at least I tried to. Commercial auditions, background roles, cheap student films where they paid you with pizza slices instead of cash. Most months I barely survived. Then one night my friend Marcus handed me a business card after rehearsal. "No experience needed," he said quietly. "Pays insane money." The card only showed a logo, a black mask smiling with stitched lips. Underneath it read, "We take the hit so you don't have to." I thought it was fake, or illegal, maybe both, but desperation makes people curious, so I called the number. 2 days later, I sat inside a sleek office downtown facing a woman named Vanessa. Perfect makeup, perfect posture, voice colder than hospital walls. She explained everything calmly. Clients booked private sessions. Some wanted to scream at somebody, some wanted verbal confrontations, some requested simulated arguments, others preferred physical release, slaps, shoving, humiliation, nothing that caused permanent injury, at least officially. "We provide emotional catharsis," Vanessa explained, like she was discussing spa treatments. Then she slid a contract across the table. The pay rates made my jaw drop. $500 for basic verbal sessions, $2,000 for premium physical confrontation packages, more if celebrities were involved, more if non-disclosure agreements were signed. I should have walked away immediately. Instead, I signed. Because poverty changes your definition of crazy. Training lasted 1 week. That alone should tell you how insane the industry was. They taught us breathing techniques, conflict de-escalation, how to fall safely after being shoved, how to maintain eye contact while someone screamed inches from your face. One instructor told us something I'll never forget. "The client isn't paying for violence," he said. "They're paying for permission." At first I didn't understand. Later, I understood perfectly. My first session happened inside a luxury penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The client was a hedge fund manager named Richard, 50 years old, tailored suit, gold watch worth more than my yearly rent. Vanessa briefed me beforehand. "He recently went through a divorce," she whispered. "He wants confrontation." Confrontation. That word sounded harmless. Until the session began. Richard entered the room carrying whiskey in one hand. He stared at me silently for almost 30 seconds. Then he exploded. "You think you're smarter than me?" he screamed. At first I thought he confused me for somebody else. Then I realized that was the point. I wasn't Caleb anymore. I was whoever he needed to hate: his cheating wife, his dishonest business partner, his younger self, maybe all three. He paced around me like a predator, screaming about betrayal, failure, lies. Spit flew from his mouth while veins bulged in his neck. Then suddenly, he slapped me. Hard. The room went silent afterward. Even he looked shocked for half a second. But I remembered the rules. Never react, never retaliate. So I stayed still. Richard stared at me, breathing heavily. Then something terrifying happened. He smiled. Not a happy smile, a relieved smile, like a pressure valve finally releasing steam. That was the moment I realized this business was far darker than therapy. People weren't buying healing. They were buying power. After the session ended, Richard handed me an extra $1,000 cash. "For being professional," he said casually. My cheek still burned when I thanked him. That night, I paid my overdue rent. bought groceries, reconnected my electricity, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror for almost an hour afterward, because I couldn't decide whether I'd survived something or sold part of myself permanently. The clients became stranger over time. One wealthy woman hired me to play her disappointing son. For 2 hours, she screamed about wasted potential while throwing clothes at me. Another man paid extra to insult me publicly inside a private nightclub while his friends watched laughing. Some sessions felt less like anger release and more like rehearsals for cruelty. The company called us receivers, like emotional punching bags with payroll forms, and there were hundreds of us across the country. Failed actors, ex-athletes, former military guys, single mothers drowning in debt, people willing to absorb humiliation because survival demanded it. One receiver named Owen became famous internally because he could cry on command during sessions. Clients loved it. Apparently, rich people paid more when their anger looked effective. That sentence alone should tell you everything about the world we lived in. The worst sessions happened in silence, not screaming, not violence, silence. One client named Elise booked weekly sessions every Friday night. She never yelled once. She simply sat across from me in a luxury hotel suite, drinking wine while insulting me calmly for hours. My appearance, my income, my childhood, my future. The things she said cut deeper because they sounded honest. One night I finally asked why she hired the service. She stared at me for a long time before answering softly, because nobody tells the truth anymore. That answer haunted me, because beneath the cruelty, she sounded lonely. Most clients did. That became the pattern I noticed. Powerful people carried enormous amounts of rage, not just anger, emptiness, isolation, fear, and instead of therapy, they rented human beings to absorb it. The company grew rapidly. Private investors joined. Celebrities secretly signed contracts. Corporate executives booked group release experiences for employees. America had turned emotional collapse into another luxury service, like massage therapy with psychological bruises instead of scented candles. Then came Victor Hale. Everybody in the company knew his name. Tech billionaire, magazine covers, political connections. Vanessa herself called me into her office for the assignment. "Highest paying session of your career," she said carefully. $10,000. $10,000 for one night. I should have refused immediately. Instead, I accepted before hearing details. That's the thing about desperation. It blinds you exactly when you need vision most. Victor's mansion looked more like a fortress than a home. Private security everywhere. Glass walls overlooking the ocean, modern art sculptures worth millions. But inside, the atmosphere felt cold. Dead, almost. Victor greeted me wearing sweatpants and no shoes. He looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath his eyes, hands trembling slightly. Vanessa warned me beforehand. He prefers realism. I learned what that meant quickly. Victor didn't want role play, he wanted resistance. He wanted me to argue back, to provoke him, to become the embodiment of every person who ever disappointed him. The session escalated fast. He screamed inches from my face, shoved me into walls, accused me of betrayal for things that never happened. Then suddenly he grabbed a crystal glass and hurled it across the room. It shattered beside my head. Security didn't intervene. Nobody moved. Because, technically, this was still part of the contract. Victor started crying afterward. Real crying. The kind people do when their soul finally cracks open. He collapsed onto a couch, breathing heavily, then whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "I don't know how to make people love me." That sentence changed everything, because suddenly the billionaire didn't look powerful anymore. He looked broken, completely broken, like a man who bought every luxury on earth except peace. The session ended shortly after. I should have left immediately, but while waiting near the hallway, I overheard Victor arguing with Vanessa behind closed doors. That's when I discovered the truth about the company. The sessions weren't just emotional therapy. Executives use them to avoid scandals. Politicians use them before public appearances. Celebrities use them to control violent impulses privately instead of publicly exploding. The company marketed itself as preventative emotional management. But really? It was a legal outlet for abuse, a hidden economy where poor people rented out their dignity to protect wealthy reputations. And suddenly my entire job felt disgusting. Not because clients were angry, because the system normalized it. The final breaking point happened 2 weeks later. A teenage receiver named Noah got hospitalized during a session in Miami. 19 years old, former theater student. A client punched him repeatedly after losing control. Internal reports called it an emotional escalation event. Emotional escalation. That's how corporations describe violence when lawyers get involved. Noah survived. Barely. But the company quietly settled everything with money and non-disclosure agreements. Operations resumed the next day, like nothing happened. That terrified me more than the violence itself, because everybody had become numb. The clients, the managers, even us receivers. We stopped asking whether something was wrong as long as the checks kept clearing. I quit a month later. Vanessa didn't even try stopping me. She only said one thing before I left. You'll be surprised how many people need this service. At the time, I thought she was cynical. Now I think she was telling the truth. These days, I work at a community theater in Ohio teaching acting classes to teenagers. The pay sucks. The coffee tastes terrible, but nobody spits in my face anymore. And every once in a while, I still think about those sessions. The billionaires screaming in designer suits, the influencers crying after humiliating strangers, the wealthy executives paying thousands of dollars just to feel powerful for 1 hour. People think money buys happiness. Maybe sometimes it does. But I've seen what happens when people gain everything except emotional control. They start searching for human targets instead of human connection, and somewhere behind closed penthouse doors across America, there are still desperate people standing silently in expensive rooms, getting paid to absorb somebody else's darkness.